Hey, how you doing? We've got another session here, some doodle notes, at least history with doodles, and we're going to be talking about colonialism perspectives. When I say perspectives, I'm talking about the people who lived during that time period, and in reality, there's people who are kind of competing or involved or conflicted over North America, South America, the entire New World. So let's start with this. We're going to go ahead and title our page, but instead at the top, we're going to come down here in the bottom and just give yourself a little corner here. I'm going to put it right here. Colonialism. We've talked about colonialism that involved European countries like England and France and Spain and Portugal and Holland and all these other places who were trying to go around the world and claim new parts of that world so they can make it their own and use the natural resources from those areas to enhance their own economies, their own power, their own prestige, their own influence across the world. And so we talk about colonialism. We're going to talk about different perspectives because not everybody felt the same way about this interaction as the people who were probably benefiting from it. And I'm going to go ahead and box this. Now, you don't have to do it the same way I do, but I like to make it kind of fancy. And I'm probably going to make it way fancier than I should just because I'm crazy like that. You kind of stand off on the page like those old maps and stuff you used to see. Their title looked like a pirate map. And I'm going to actually color this red. Now, I forgot to mention the colors we're going to need, but red is one of them because red represents conflict whenever it comes to these doodle notes. And there was a lot of conflict during this time period. Red is one of those colors I'm going to have, but really I'm done with the red for a day. But just so you know, I started with that. Yellow, got to have yellow. Can't have notes without yellow. And green's a must have. Whenever you do doodle notes with history, you got to have red, green, and yellow just like a stoplight. And I'm going to go a step further and I'm going to have a little brown. And I got a little gray. If you don't have gray, a light blue or a blue, just draw lightly with it. And this one's not even that necessary. And this one's not super necessary either. But the three they had before, you got to have them. Now, because I know that some people struggle with spatial reasoning, I'm going to help you out. And roughly, here's about the middle of the page. You can take your finger and use the middle of the page right there. Actually, I'm going to use my left hand. So I'm going to use. If you're right-handed, use your left hand. And I'm going to take my finger and my thumb, and I'm just going to do one of these deals, just like make an L. So I start in the middle of the page. I'm just going to go like this, like I'm putting a big L on my forehead. I'm not going to say I'm a loser. I'm going to say I am lucky to be here. How's that? That's a perfect L. And then I've got these little tick marks here. Now I'm going to take my fingers, my rock on fingers. Rock on, dude. Start right here in the middle. I'm going to go like this. Start in the middle. Boop. And the reason I did that is not because I'm trying to draw a cross or a diamond or a rhombus. I am truly trying to give you some parameters which to work within. Because we have to put this in perspective, and we're going to draw North and South America. But if you make them too big, you can't put the other notes on there. So if I don't stay within this area here, I'm probably getting too big. So I'm going to draw this, and if you have a map, I guarantee your map is probably better than what I'm drawing. But we're going to practice this stuff because that's how we get better at learning geography. And I'm going to start with North America, how it looks kind of funky like this, and all kinds of stuff on here. Up by Canada, what we know now, and I'm going to come down around the United States, and I'm going to draw Florida, and I'm going to come around here, the Gulf of Mexico. Then I'm going to come back around here because that was Alaska. I'm coming down here. This is not proportioned very well, so please do not grade me on perfection, but it kind of looks like America. And then down here, I'm going to add a place called South America. And I'm actually going to go out of my parameters here, but that's okay. Not too bad. And so now I've got North and I got South America. Not terrible. But I'm going to label them. And I'm going to label them big all the way across. So if you got to turn your paper a little bit, go for it. And the reason I'm labeling it big is I want to put an emphasis that the time period we're talking about and the subject we're talking about goes beyond just one continent. It really covers this entire Western Hemisphere, which makes up North and South America. Because European interactions were all over the map. And because I'm going to be using the ocean area to put words and terminology, I'm going to add a little color to my continents. And on a map, typically brown represents land. And so I'm going to just add a little bit, edge it all the way around. And the reason I'm doing that is I want it to pop off my paper a little bit. So even if I'm not a great artist, now that I got it labeled, I've got it colored, maybe it kind of does look like North and South America. At least in my own mind, is trained to know brown means land and ground. Well, it's going to help me. So the whole idea with these colors is to um, um, try to trigger things in our mind and associate with certain ideas or concepts. And well, that's what we're going to use brown for. So we're going to talk about these different perspectives, and there's really three of them we're going to focus on. For starters, who was originally in this land? Well, Native Americans were. So we're going to start with the Native American perspective. Native American. And another way to refer to Native American perspective is the term POV, point of view. And we all have our own points of view, but instead of writing it all out, we're just going to put it POV. And whenever we use a vocab word or a terminology that we want to pop off the page, we use a kapow box. Kapow. Never gets old. Kapow. And because it's a kapow box and it's a vocab word and important terminology, I'm going to add some yellow because that's how we describe points of view, or excuse me, important terms, which in this case is a point of view. And another point of view we're going to talk about is called the European point of view. And you notice I'm spacing these things out because I'm going to write some stuff underneath them, and I got to make sure I have lots of room. So another point of view is something called the European point of view. And I asked my class the other day about this, and one kid said the white person's point of view. Hey, Europeans make up a lot of different people. There's the Portuguese, there's the Spanish, the English, the Dutch, the Italian, the French, all these different people. It's from a continent. And try not to just get fixated on one version of that continent because there's lots of people there from lots of different backgrounds and different ways of life. So we're going to use a little color on this because that's what we do for the European point of view and the Native American point of view. Anytime it's a key term, we're going to do that. There's one other group we're going to bring up. And this group is something that probably is something very relevant to modern day history and current events and stuff. We're going to talk about the African perspective. African POV. And once again, this deserves to be recognized on your paper as an important term. So we're going to add a little kapow box. We're going to add a little color because that color reminds us it's important. Between the visuals of the shape of the box and the color, we know we got to look at this with a little more care as we're going over our stuff. So let's talk about all these different perspectives because they all were different. We're going to start with the Native American point of view. And I like imagery, pictures, and I think maybe too often I'm pretty one-sided when I look at Native Americans because I really think Native Americans are really probably the greatest environmentalist you can ask for. Throughout history, Native Americans were wonderful in terms of um, being part of an ecosystem, a part of the land, part of the environment, as opposed to dominating the environment. And when we look and talk about Native American culture, um, natural symbols are a big part of representing what Native Americans have been in history. And so I draw a little feather, and that feather makes me think of strong connection. I think there's um, a lot of connection with the Native American community when it comes to the feather and um, well, animal life, that type of thing. So let's talk about the point of view these Native Americans might have had during this time period. And we're talking the 15, 16, 17, 1800s. If I was a Native American at this time, I might look at it as, hey, we were here first. And they're not wrong. They absolutely were. I might also get a little irritated because as these Europeans are coming in, what's happening to the Native Americans? They're starting to be pushed around. And I'd say, wait a second, I'm being pushed off my land. That would cause some conflict. And if I was a Native American, I'd be looking around and say, listen, they're not just doing it to me, they're doing it to that tribe and that tribe and that tribe. So maybe we should work together. And if we work together, we could defend the land. At least their right to the land. And the last thing I'm going to say is probably pretty universal as time went on with Native American their relationships with the Europeans. But a lot of these groups became very, very untrusting of Europeans. And all these things combined, when I think of Native Americans' perspective, these are the things I think about. And so I'm going to draw a little think aloud cloud around all that stuff because whenever you see that term, Native American perspective, during this time period, I think it's safe to say that this is probably some of the things that were going through their minds. Once again, I wasn't there. And full disclosure, I am not a descendant of Native Americans. But I can look at primary resources and documents and testimonies, and I can get a fair clue that maybe this is the way they felt. Now we've talked about, at least you should be talking about, ideas or concepts involving push and pull factors. Think about this for a second. Was that a push or a pull scenario? I'd say they're being pushed. Now that's going to be different than the European perspective, and I'm going to draw some images for the European perspective too, because triangle trade is another doodle note you should probably watch if you haven't already. But the triangle trade, Europeans were here because they were trying to create an opportunity, and I'm going to add a little gold here. that involved their monarchs, their kings, their queens. They're representing in their minds a higher power. But they were also out for money. And we know from trade that they were selling guns. We know that they were making rum, booze. In case you don't know what rum is, I don't recommend it, but it's a reality, like one of those old moonshine jugs. And textiles. And I'm kind of cheating a little bit by adding some different colors that I originally told you about, but I'm gonna make this color pink because pink is pretty. Okay, but I want this imagery to pop in my head because I want to make these connections to the triangle trade. It's important because these factors are driving people, or maybe I should say pulling people to the new world. And they had a pretty powerful motivation to be coming here. Number one, Europeans are claiming the land for their kings and queens. They really thought they were doing the right thing by by spreading the influence of their country. There's a lot of a nationalistic pride that came along with this. They were falling in good favor of their king and queen. And something else, and I'm going to say something a little bit controversial to some people. These people believed that God was on their side. At least I'm going to say they believed. Because you think about this, and I know I've mentioned this in classes to kids over the years, but um, there is this concept called divine right, where a king and queen had their power because they believed they were given that power, that position of authority, by the right of God. And they would rule over their kingdoms because God wanted them to. Well, if you are claiming this territory in the name of your king and queen, by default, you're claiming it in the name of God, at least in the minds of many of the people who were doing these things. And so it's very easy to justify some of your actions and your choices because you think it's the will of God. Now, I don't. There's nothing negative about religion. Religion's a fantastic institution for um, for people every day of their lives. But we have to be honest about some people's motivations, and we have to be honest about some people's use of faith in the past to do some things that aren't so good. And all religions can find people who have made those mistakes, but it's just part of history. Um, and because you believe all these different things, you might actually feel like you're better than other people. And I know that when Europeans came to this part of the world or they came to Africa, they saw these people were ungodly. These people don't have all the cool weapons and tools and stuff we have. We are better than them. And it's very easy to get this mentality that you are superior. And when you feel you're better than somebody else, that mentally gives yourself a lot of permission to do a lot of things that maybe that aren't so good. And I cannot discount the bare bones reason why people were even willing to get out the couch in the first place. These people wanted wealth. And I'm going to add this opportunity. I don't care how much you love your king and queen. If you're living life pretty good now and you don't have to get out the couch, then why bother? But back during this time period, people were anxious and desperate for chances to better their lives, to improve their standard of living, to go on adventure, but more importantly, to just get rich. And so all these different things combined or what I think about when I think about the European point of view on colonialism. And I gave myself a little think aloud cloud. I'm adding this because I like my notes to be colorful. Okay, so did we just say that this was a push or pull scenario? I'm going to say it's a pull scenario. Because you're being pulled by this idea that you can have wealth and that you can do great things and have new opportunities. Very attractive. That takes us to our last perspective, which is the African perspective. And I'm going to draw an image that makes me really hammer close to what this experience might look like. Because there's really no good way to describe what these people might have been going through. What am I drawing? Yeah, chains, shackles. The African point of view was not a good one. These people were literally kidnapped and enslaved. Now, we can talk about different videos and that might talk about the actual trip, the triangle trade, and what that might have looked like for African Americans. But understand that there are lots of parties. Slavery has been around since before the written word. It's been around for centuries and thousands of years, actually. You can go back to the ancient Egyptians and the Romans and the Greeks, and it's just been around forever. Probably as soon as people realize they can beat somebody up and make them do their bidding, that's when slavery started. I wasn't there. I can't say for sure, but I can say nothing about Europe invented slavery. In fact, other Africans were complicit in slavery happening because they were benefiting from some of this trade that was going on with the Europeans, and because they were trying to spread their own political influence on the continent of Africa. They were rounding up their competitors, their enemies, and they were feeding them to the Europeans. But when we mix that scenario and this very old institution of slavery with these other concepts of superiority and believing you're inspired by a higher power and different things like that, the European version of slavery in the Americas took on a more racial um, form. And a lot of what we're talking about during this time period leads us to some of the racial tensions we still talk about today in current events. So I always talk about going back and asking why to get deeper and deeper and deeper, understand why things happen. Well, this is when you keep asking whys about racial tension in the United States or any other place in the world, especially European connections, enough whys are going to get you to this point. So this is important to talk about. These Africans were forced to leave their homes. And we know when you force somebody to go somewhere, that is tied to either push or pull, right? Probably push. These people, for all sensible explanation, were punished and tortured. I gotta spell tortured right though. On a daily occasion. They worked for no money. And they had no choices and no freedoms. pretty miserable existence, to be honest with you. And once again, I wasn't there. And I never benefited or suffered from this time period directly. Directly. But when I think about the African experience, I have to think that these were the things that maybe were going through their minds as they're being stuffed on a slave ship and sent across the Atlantic Ocean. So we've got different perspectives on colonialism. And I know we all come to different backgrounds and different points of view, and we live life today, and we have our own perspectives on one thing or another. But like I said, if you ask enough whys and you dig deeper and you go far enough back, you're going to find that the conflicts that oftentimes are happening in modern day had a beginning, had a starting point. And the starting point, these are the elements that we probably should really take a look at if we're going to better understand who we are and why we're where we're at and society. And that's it. So this is colonialism. These are perspectives on the world from that time period. And I hope there's something that you got out of this that you can use. Thank you. Good job.